Hello, everyone, and welcome to day one of Career Bootcamp 2025, where we have an action-packed agenda that is really intended to help you unlock the secrets of building a successful career. This session is offered in English and French simultaneously. To view and participate in the French session, if you could please return to the Zoom lobby and join the French session. Afin de visionner et participer dans la session en français, veuillez retourner au lobby et cliquer sur le lien pour la session française. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I'm so grateful for their careful stewardship of this land and these waters. I know that many of you are joining us from locations across the country, and I invite you to pause, to reflect, and to honor and understand the deep history of the lands from which you are participating. So Career Boot Camp is the largest conference in the Government of Canada, and its goal is to support you in your career journey. It's great to have you join us today, and I encourage you to share your questions with us. Don't be shy. The answer will not only serve you, but I'm sure that there are many others who will be interested in learning with you. As we move through today's session, please share your questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for questions you like. If you see questions that are quite interesting to you, just click on them with the thumbs up button, and that'll get it prioritized. As with all Federal Youth Network sessions, this session will be recorded, so you can go back to check out the recordings and the insights at a later date. In addition to the recordings on the Federal Youth Network YouTube channel, there's another way to learn this year. There will be a podcast series of the Career Bootcamp sessions after today's and tomorrow's session. The podcast will be made available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'd also like to note that the PowerPoint presentations that you're seeing now and in future sessions is included in the Federal Youth Network wiki page, so that you can feel free to follow along at your own rate and to improve your learning experience. Also, all of the resources shared during this session will be added to the wiki page under resources. So with all of those public service announcements, I'd love to introduce myself. My name is Nancy Hamzaoui, and I work at the Public Health Agency of Canada, and I am privileged to be your moderator for this session today. I have olive skin, black rimmed glasses, and I'm wearing a white blouse, a black and white blazer, and a black, red, and white hijab. It is great to be part of this values and ethics panel today. Very timely. It is absolutely a fascinating time when guideposts are changing and the ground is constantly changing. It really is a time when we step up as a public service. And through all of this, our values, our institutional values as a public service are more important than ever. Defense of democracy, people values, stewardship, excellence, and integrity. Our values are more than just rules. They are our North Star, and they're our inspiration as we serve and provide our best advice to the government. Our values and ethics are the foundation of a credible, responsive, and effective public service. They guide how we work together, how we engage with citizens and with partners, and how we steward public resources that we've been entrusted with. Each of you are part of an institution with a long history of serving Canadians. The decisions and actions that you take, no matter how big or small those actions may be, they help shape public trust in government. And that is absolutely more and more critical in the time that we're living at this point in time, earning and maintaining that trust. But to get started with today's session, we have a few quick polling questions. They're quick, easy, and all answers are good answers. So I'm going to go to question number 1. Did you attend the Values and Ethics Symposium in the fall? Answers. So yes, no, I'm not sure. And then question number 2. Just going to check and see. I think there might be some video problems as I see in the comments. But Haley is clearly taking care of them. And I'm just going to check the poll. Okay. There we go. We now have answers for you. So I see not many more people did not participate in the symposium this fall. 77% did not. So I guess I would say great that you've joined us today. We'll do our best to recap that symposium. Thousands of people did participate across the country in the fall symposium, and in fact, where that was one of many steps along the way in terms of our national public service conversation on values and ethics. In terms of the symposium itself, you can, if you didn't, for those of you who didn't get a chance to participate, you can find links at the Canada School of Public Service catalog to find more information about it. Sorry, I missed the results on question number 2. I was so focused on question number 1. If you could put the results back on screen. Thank you. So true or false on the social media question, and absolutely true. Yes, the key verb in this particular question was the perception. As you share, like, or post online, the perception of you supporting that particular post is real and something to be always aware of. So thank you for participating. We've got a great number of active participants today, so looking forward to the session. So I'd say let's get started. So I will introduce our superstar panelists that we are very fortunate to have with us today. First, I'd like to introduce Ciara Pourjalali. Ciara is part of one of the best social media teams in the public service. She's a communications officer at the Communications Security Establishment Canada, CSEC. If you remember the Get Cyber Safe public awareness campaign, Ciara is one of the key people who brought it to life. In fact, she received an award for exceptional collaboration in revitalizing the campaign, and I'm really looking forward to your social media savvy advice today. Next, we have Alazar Cisse. Alazar is the Director of Corporate Finance at Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, where he oversees and reports on Canada's liabilities related to Indigenous claims as well as those in the North. That is a big job, and I know we can learn a lot from your experiences. And we have Justin Munyaneza. Justin brings a great breadth of experience to our panel. Justin's currently the Director of the Office of International Science, Partnership and Collaboration at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. He was a Chief of Staff to the Associate Deputy Minister. He worked in the Deputy Clerk's Office, at the Privy Council Office, and he has worked at the Department of Justice and the Department of National Defence. I'm looking forward to hearing about your reflections with the perspectives from these heavyweight departments and your background as a lawyer. So welcome to all of you. So let's get started. I'm going to turn first to Justin to help walk us through our power deck today.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nancy, for the introductions, and thank you for moderating this panel. My name is Justin Munyaneza, and I'm also joining you from the unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. Let's turn to the next slide. So when people ask me what's the one thing you remember when you joined the public service many years ago, and I'm aging myself here, I was a young public servant joining Justice Canada, and I still remember going up the elevator to the director's office to take the oath. Back then, you would do it in person, and she's still my mentor, and I still remember this going in her office, taking the oath, and again, people ask me, "Do you remember this?" I'm like, "Yes, you're taking the oath to fulfill the duties that devolve in your responsibilities." Uh, Values and ethics. What is it? There's so many definitions, and you can see them on the slide, but being a public servant is many things. You're curious, you're professional, you're creative, you're passionate, you're driven. As public servants, we're placed in a unique position of trust, requiring standards of ethical behavior that reflect our commitments to the values of our department, agencies, but also to the government of Canada. As Nancy mentioned, as the world evolves with AI, social media, which we'll talk about later, values also are an evolving tree. I always call it an evolving tree. Things change, and we have to adapt to the geopolitical context. Now, organizations, to some extent, define what is right and wrong for its employees. Hence why we have the values and ethics code. So I have our values and ethics code here, which is at DFO. We have a little booklet that we hand out to a few folks to guide them through how they should adhere to those values and ethics. Um, as individual, ethics are formulated through the operations of how we function, our environment. So ethics is many things, and we can get them from our family, our friends, our peers, our colleagues, experiences, values, moral, the legal system, religion. Those are ethics. Let's turn to the next slide. So these are the main 5 behaviors to which the federal public servants should conduct themselves with. In general terms, values respect the principles and standards of behavior, integrity, fairness, kindness, excellence, respect. Now, sometimes values are often confused with habits, and I want to make that clear. But that's why you have these 5 behaviors that guide us to what values are in democracy. So again, respect for democracy, respect for people, integrity, stewardship, excellence. Let's turn to the next slide. So why do values matter? So having a practice, or I'll call it an instrument, like the code of values and ethics, demonstrates that values and ethics guide decision making, which in turn engenders trust in the institutions, but also among individuals, among us, among peers. And with trust, this builds moral, which leads to productivity. So again, these are a few examples. Now I'm going to give you an example about myself. When I started my career, I was working at the Justice Department, the paralegal, went to law school, and there was this, when you become a lawyer, you're part of the law society. So I did the Quebec bar, but people had the Ontario bar. And there was all this question about, am I a public servant first, or am I a lawyer first? And it's always you're a public servant. You're part of the government, right? You're part of the government of Canada. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, Justice came out with this directive on civil litigation involving Indigenous peoples. This directive was to promote an approach to conflict resolution that is consistent with the goal of achieving reconciliation. So this meant that if you got a case, a civil litigation case, and it involves an Indigenous person or a group, there are different factors you had to look into. And I remember people sitting down and saying, okay, how do we do this? Do we treat it differently? And the answer was no. It was just as part of the reconciliation approach, you have to look at a case. It involved an indigenous person. Doesn't mean you treat them differently, but you apply the justice principles. But also, you're a public servant. This is part of the mandate that we're given. You look at it, but it didn't mean you're going against any other principle out there. Another example I can give you, working here at DFO, we have a lot of scientists and researchers who give a lot of conferences. They travel abroad. Sometimes they go to China, as an example, and they go in their own capacity. Again, there, we always tell them to look at the values and ethics. Like, you're a public servant. Remember that yes, you're a researcher in your own capacity. You publish books, you publish papers, but don't remember that you are also a DFO employee. So I'm just giving this as examples, right? Because we have to uphold and respect what we believe in, but also remember that there's values and ethics at play. Now I am going to turn over to our next panelist to present to you what it means to uphold respect for democracy. Turning it over to you, Alazar.
Thank you, Justin. And I am also joining from the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And Justin did a really good job of setting the scene for where we're going with this conversation. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So upholding respect for democracy. Before I jump into this one, I just want to highlight again that there are diverse roles in the public service, from frontline staff, our border guards, our correctional officers, to internal services like myself. So again, the unifying force here is that values and ethics for the public sector. So we all, again, I think Nancy said it well, it is our North Star. We all align to this, and it helps guide our work, and we live and breathe it. So slide 11, we are talking about respect for democracy, and you can see from the slides that it's very much about upholding the functioning of the institution, and our nation as well too. I remember hearing about or just very recently the transition in the United States and the peaceful transition that's happening there, and how we also have that similar peaceful transition that's happening for our democracy as well. So in essence, this is very much speaking to the elected officials and how we support them by giving that fearless advice and the loyal implementation once decisions are made. Some questions that you can ask yourself are your mandate or your organization. How do the parliament and legislation flow? The laws govern the jobs that you do. And again, diverse roles, but I'll speak from more of the accounting or finance side of things. But we look, for this role, there's a Financial Administration Act. So it was passed by Parliament. It helps, and those authorities flow down from to my deputy minister to my chief financial officer, and it flows all the way down to my position and to my employees, and they exercise those authorities to further the objectives of that law. So ask yourself these questions. What is guiding these? What legislation is guiding your rules? What policies are guiding your rules? So it's not just legislation as well too. There's the policy as well. And again, talking about delegated authorities. So whenever a payment or a staffing action is made, again, these are authorities that are by virtue of legislation, the Public Service Employment Act. So flows to our deputy minister, flows down to staffing managers, and also down to managers as well too. So just keep that in mind, that there is that flow through with these legislation. So upholding democracy is ensuring that we're respecting the laws that are before us, and also again, I circle back to the fearless advice and loyal implementation, and that will be the theme going forward or throughout. So I'll go to the next slide. Upholding respect for people. So this one is a quite interesting one, and it speaks to our times, and I think folks might be aware of the clerk's call to action on anti-racism, equity, and inclusion. So it very much speaks to the idea that we are an inclusive and diverse workforce, and how we can continue to build on that and ensure that folks are involved in those decisions and feel a part of them. So it's very much, that's how I would see this. And I would also speak to other elements as well too, in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So ask, how do you, in your job, how do you uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedom? I would highly recommend folks look at that and look and to see if how their actions are doing that. And again, these aren't large things; these are small things too. It's how you interact with your colleagues, how you maintain those relationships, not only your colleagues, even outside with other departments, and again, the frontline workers, those that are working with Canadians and Indigenous peoples as well too. So just how are you, the respect for people. So it's broader than just internal to the public service, it extends further. I'll move to slide 13. So these are the last three, and I will take some time. So integrity. And this is again going back to the non-partisanship and the duty of loyalty. So ask yourself, is the advice being influenced in any one direction, and because of potentially partisan lines? So our role is to be a nonpartisan public service and to give that advice. And then once a decision is made by our duly elected officials, we will move forward with them. Integrity, again, this is an example that I had very recently, and I was able to navigate it with the support of my management team. When you're looking into contracting and ensuring that the rules around contracting are being upheld, speaking and consulting with your values and ethics teams, trying to get as much information as possible so that you can understand how the perception of any conflict of interest can be avoided. So it's important to ensure, when we talk about integrity, it's integrity for yourself and for the public service as well too. And it's trying to avoid some of those issues. In terms of stewardship, this one is again back to my finance side of things. It's a very important role. As I mentioned about the Financial Administration Act, financial officers have a very important role, as well as other folks in the public service. We are granted authorities to spend money by Parliament. So, and that money comes from taxpayers. So we need to ensure that the money that we are investing or putting out the door there is that value for money proposition as well too. So just being mindful that again, at the end of the day, these are taxpayer funds that Parliament is granting the public service to spend in a manner to further public services for Canadians within Canada. So within Canada and abroad as well too. Sorry. And then the last element is excellence. So this one's an interesting one in terms of we all do this every day. In your performance management agreements, there is that learning plan. We are always invested in learning and adopting new ways of working. I think Justin mentioned the new technology, and I think there's artificial intelligence. There's always new ways of doing work, and this is an important aspect of the public service values, and that we're adopting new ways to grow professionally and to become a high-performing public service. I remember there was I believe there was a research that said that the Canadian public service is one of the best in the world. So I hold that very close to myself, up to my heart too, as well too. So we are continuing to adapt, especially in an environment that's sometimes quite dynamic. With that, I will pass it to Sierra.
Thank you, Elazar. We'll go to the next slide. Perfect. So as we all mentioned earlier, social media is constantly evolving and the guidelines for us as public servants have changed. So let's go over our responsibilities. As public servants, we have a duty of loyalty, and this refers to the importance of an impartial and effective public service. To paint this clearer, think about what your department's mandate is and what the objectives are. And regardless of a person's position, everyone in that department works towards those common goals, which are essential to the mission of the public service at large, to serve all Canadians. What is an example of this in violation on social media? Let's say, for example, an employee works at Transport Canada and all they use their social platform for is to constantly criticize the department's actions, policies, or programs. Now, this would be a very obvious violation. When it comes to your clicks, they do matter. As more and more of our work is conducted virtually, it shapes and transforms the way we connect with our colleagues. So this includes what you like, share, and comment on. It's essential to ensure not to appear to speak on behalf of your department or even the Government of Canada, as posts can be easily misinterpreted when we don't have the full context. Another way to view this is, say your colleague sends you a funny post online, and before you go to reshare or comment or post, just think, would you have the same reaction 5 years from now? And if so, would you want people to see it? Every action you take leaves a trail, and this forms your digital footprint. And it's quite hard to go back in time to erase or have to explain to your managers why you did what you did. A few more examples to paint this clearly are avoiding from controversial or divisive topics, spreading misinformation or unverified sources of information, and obviously personal or highly confidential work information. Now, anonymity is another hot topic, and you might be very tempted to comment on a popular social media site anonymously. Doing so doesn't fully remove your responsibilities as a public servant, so it's best to be mindful of the potential consequences. For example, how would the public view this discourse? There's also a slight risk of breaching confidentiality, as some anonymous posts might just unintentionally reveal sensitive information about the department or its affairs. And in the end, these are not rules nor absolutes. We always have to balance the duty of loyalty or our online behaviors against the public servant's freedom of expression. So what you can do instead is focus on building your brand. Instead of posting inappropriate jokes, memes, or offensive content, one of the best things you can do for yourself is manage your professional reputation. It allows you to be in control, be authentic, and share the opinions that matter most to you. And you can stay tuned for how to build more of a professional profile online in the various sessions of Career Bootcamp. We'll go to the next slide. Awesome. So we'll start with trust. How do we build trust and credibility? Trust is the basis of most, if not all, relationships. It's usually a learned skill that you develop early in your career, and upholding these strong values establishes your reputation as not only trustworthy, but also reliable. This cycle is very rewarding, as the further you progress in your career, the more likely your colleagues are to invest back into you. Guides decision making. So if at any time you're unsure about making a decision in a complex or ambiguous situation, you can always go back to the values of being a public servant. And the more you face challenges, the more you'll be able to flex your muscle and successfully manage these challenges with integrity. And finally, foster strong relationships. This essentially sums up all 3 points, and it's ultimately about civility and respect for one another in the public service. And building your network and knowing people in the public service is your superpower, and having them in your circle is the key to long-term career development. So with that, I will pass it back to Nancy to guide us through the question and answer period.
Thank you very much, all three of you. That was fantastic. And thank you to all of you. We have got several great questions. Thank you for contributing. Just a reminder, if you see a question that you like, feel free to upvote it. And if you have a question, feel free to use it all in the Q&A function.
Thank you for that, Nancy. And I know it's a quite difficult moment right now in the public service. There were reductions announced in budget 2023, I believe also in 2024. So these are very much clear commitments to find efficiencies and savings. And it doesn't, I don't lose sight of the fact that it hurts people, it impacts people. So please, if you do need to consult, EAP or employee assistance program as well too, please feel free. But what I would say is, again, it goes back to what Sierra was saying. It's just being mindful of, you are part of the public service. You are, you are the brand of the public service. You have individual thoughts as well too, but how you can balance that and understand that you have to find that right balance in between the two. So what I would say is, what I would advise is, just be mindful of that. Be mindful of the fact that there is the values and ethics at play during this. But again, we are all human. We are all individuals. It doesn't mean that you agree with everything that's being decided, but you are finding that way to express yourself and also upholding the professionalism of the public service. So hopefully I answered the question, but I know I could turn to some of my panelists. They might have a little bit more concrete advice on that matter, but I understand that this is a very challenging environment right now, especially for our new and younger public servants. So
Thanks, Aliza. Sierra or Justin, do you want to add to that?
For sure, what I would suggest is first approaching who you're most comfortable with. So in your example, you stated your friends or your family, maybe talk it through with them first. It's also likely that you're not the only one in the entire public service who feels this way. And since the government of Canada is our employer, they do have the duty to accommodate. So again, it's not facing this problem on your own. Know that you have people to support you. Your supervisor would also be a good place to start. And in the case that you feel awkward approaching your manager, you can always bring them with you to the manager. You have the union at your disposal, as well as the ethics office. So just know that you're never alone facing these challenges.
I might just say it's an excellent question and very timely. And as someone who experienced workforce adjustment just over a decade ago, I absolutely understand how hard that is personally. And my colleagues have already noted, your friends and your family are just so critical at that time, just in terms of supporting you as you find your way in terms of managing your own personal situation. However, the government's decision is the government's decision. And so as part of our respect for democracy and the government's decision making, it is really about focusing on your path and making and not taking advantage of all of the tools that we have available to us. There are a number of tools that are made available to employees, but if I could turn back time, I wish I wish I did tap the employee assistance program a lot more. And I do remember maxing out my network. So network, and that's you never know what the future holds. But at that time, I can tell you, I didn't think I'd be holding a deputy minister position now. And so just know that you have a lot of colleagues and family and friends out there to support you. Okay, the next question. I work in regional conservation where there are relatively few players. I've turned down opportunities for community involvement due to potential perceived conflict of interest at an opportunity cost to my professional development. How can we remain impartial yet active in our fields? So actually, I'm going to turn to you, Ciara, first, and then open it up to colleagues.
Thanks, Nancy. Yep, that's another good question. I would first suggest you to obviously exhaust all the resources you have internally and then look to see if you could make contact with someone in a position that's lateral to you and see what their advice is, because obviously we are not alone here. And it's a good time to voice your opinions to your management, senior management, and just again make your voice heard, saying that, you know, I still value my work, I still want to be here, but I need these tools. And how will you support me through this process?
Lazar, Justin, did you want to add?
I would just add, and I think Ciara, you mentioned in the first question, the Values and Ethics Office. So first, I would say, good job for identifying that potential or perceived conflict that might have occurred. And I believe there are options that the Values and Ethics Office might have for your specific situation, because I know there are safeguards that can be put in place, and maybe exploring those. But again, working with your HR, working with your manager, and again, there are ways that you can navigate some of these conflicts. But I just want to congratulate you for identifying it ahead of time and being upholding that value. So
Maybe just to add one little thing, it's as Alazar said, reach out to your values and ethics group. There's always one in each department, and because sometimes you think something is there's a potential risk to do it, but you never know. Just ask the questions and go from there. That's all I can give as an advice. You never know.
Thank you all. The next upvoted question, I think, is a bit similar in terms of the topic, but the question is framed differently in the sense of, have you personally had this experience, and how do you overcome it? So maybe on this one, I'll start with you, Justin.
And Nancy, I think you're referring to like if I've had a personal opinion and how did I
personal opinion or potential conflict of interest.
Yeah, I think it's more in the personal opinion, and I'll go to what Alazar was mentioning in terms of call to action on anti-racism, equity, and inclusion. I was part of various initiatives where my personal views and professional boundaries were being blurry and tested, because this is I would go in meetings and some people didn't agree with a certain initiative, but then it became, I'll give you an example. We cannot do this because we don't have the budget. We cannot do this for this. But then I was in those meetings saying, well, my personal views, and here I am as a Black person, like they affect me. This is my day-to-day life. So how did I do this? It's hard staying neutral in the professional settings, but being neutral requires self-awareness, being open-minded, and a willingness to consider different viewpoints. Like it's not easy. I'm not saying this is easy. It took me years to develop, but that does not mean we should remain indifferent or passive, but rather engage in the analysis. Go back and forth, listen to the other party, listen to the different opinions, think through it And I'll give you an analogy one because this is my legal background. When you go before a judge, they have their personal views, but they'll listen to both parties. At the end of the day, they apply the justice principles. If I do an analogy, here we have the code of the ethics and the values and ethics. You listen to both parties, you analyze, you discuss in a respectful manner, and then provide your opinions as a judge would do, provide a decision. So that's what I did. It's you listen. Yes, some some views were a little bit personal to me, but I listened to them, provided my opinion. And in some cases, those initiatives are now in place. It took time, but it worked out. I don't know if my amazing panelists have anything to add to this.
You got a lot of questions, so I'm going to go to the next one. How do the nonpartisan loyalty values, being a federal public servant, relate to our actions regarding provincial governments? In other words, do we also have to stay quiet if we disagree with a provincial government decision, policy, statement, when they're not related to the federal government and different parties? So I think I will start with Alizar.
So, thanks, Nancy. So I'd probably circle back to what Sierra said, right? So it's being mindful that you represent the public service as well too. So opining on a policy decision by another government, just being mindful that you are part of the public service, and there could be that, and I use the word very carefully, the perceived views that you are representing the public service when you opine on that policy. So I think maybe I'll turn to Sierra if she wants to add a little bit more, but I think it's the idea that it's very much that these values and ethics, they translate outwards as well too. So just say that.
Yeah, thanks, Alizar. And it's not that we have to stay quiet necessarily, because like I said, we all have to balance that with our own freedom of expression and our own fight for democracy. And if something really bothers you at the provincial level, is there a forum for you to comment on? Can you approach your local MP to have your input there? Because we must keep in mind that all levels of government essentially work together to one common goal. So yeah, definitely the door isn't closed for you on that conversation. It's just about making your voice heard, and then potentially finding the other perspectives and maybe the reasons why those steps were taken to make the decision in the first place.
Thank you for that. Okay, so I think I'm going to go to the next question. How can we address distrust towards senior management or the government of the day expressed by our colleagues? So I'm going to start with Sierra.
For sure. So again, it's about your circle and who you're comfortable bringing these pieces up to. So a safe space would be perhaps the employee assistance program, because everything does remain confidential in those discussions. But again, if it is directly impacting your work on a day-to-day basis, it's best to let your supervisor or management know, because likely it is discouraging you in some way and you won't be performing your best. And we obviously want to perform our best to support all Canadians. So it's just about finding those tools and resources to help you navigate these emotions.
Thanks for that. Justin or Alizar, did you want to add?
But also ask questions. And by this, I mean, when I became an executive, is something I didn't do often in my first few months, where in my head, this is what this decision was, and hence why the distress maybe would occur. But as Sierra said, ask the question, like ask, why was this decision made? And your managers will answer the question, your senior management, or And again, there are other sources, EAP, values and ethics groups, HR, but I always say this, asking the question sometimes might answer a lot of things. Don't be shy and go out there and say, look, I want to understand more as to why A was chosen versus B.
Great. Thanks for that, Justin. I really like that. Don't be shy, ask questions. So that takes me to the next question. Are we not allowed to express our political opinion as public servants on our own free time? So I'm going to kick off with Justin.
It's a tricky question because I'm gonna ask you define free time, right? So I'll give you an example. If you're expressing your political opinions on LinkedIn, and let's say you have Ciara or Nancy, and it says your position, which department you work for, and you're expressing your political opinions, well, that goes against your values and ethics. You are a government employee, you're supposed to remain non-partisan. But again, this does not preclude you to be involved in the political life. Like voting is, everybody has a right to vote here, and it's more how you do it. It's the how, right? And again, I think Alazar mentioned this, and Ciara, there's various sources within the department where you can go ask questions. Hey, can I do this? Can I put posters on my loan? Or can I put stickers on my car? Like those are questions you can ask. But again, I don't want to say yes or no because it depends on how you define free time and how you do it. But I gave an example. If you use LinkedIn, if you use your personal email to be politically active, well, that goes against the values and ethics because we as public servants are supposed to be non-partisan. I'll pass this along to my panelists here.
Justin, you did a really good job on that one. And I just add that the Public Service Commission has some really good information as well, too, as to the definition of a political activity and a lot of good information there. So I'd highly recommend consulting that as a resource as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Public servants run in elections, and there are provisions for that and protections to ensure that we avoid collision with our values and ethics. So thanks for that, Alazar. Okay, then the next one, which I think is another great question. While on LinkedIn or any other social media platform, how can we be influencers while maintaining impartiality so that our audience understands that any advice we give or comments we share are not endorsed by the government of Canada? So I'm going to kick off with Alazar and give Ciara a heads up that I'm going to turn to her because you're the social media guru.
I was going to do the exact same thing to Nancy, but what I would say is, and I'd love to hear Ciara's thoughts on this as well too. I've seen, on Twitter, on Instagram, or on LinkedIn, comments regarding, comments expressed here do not represent my employer. Something along the lines of that as a disclaimer. Not sure how much that holds up, but I'd love to hear Ciara's thoughts. But I think that might be one tool as well. But
For sure. So it's a very tough question. And when you're writing your post, you have to consider a bunch of things, kind of like the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and how. So you first have to think of who you are as an individual. Who is your audience? Who are you trying to reach? And then the way you're framing, so the words you're using, are you using words that specifically attack a department, their actions, policies, or programs? Or are you just a regular citizen commenting on the actions, policies, or programs that the department has taken? So your tone can still criticize, but in a respectful manner. And I think that is probably the whole point of having like an open and public discussion, because then you invite people in the comments, for example, to either agree or disagree. And in that way, it's more of a conversation rather than a battle of who's right or who's wrong, because likely in the end, we are trying to get to the root of the problem, of the policy, or whatever sparked your comment in the first place. So it's just about positioning yourself where you would be open to feedback and hearing feedback from others as well.
Thanks, Sierra. Okay, I know we're getting close to the end of our time, so I'm going to try and get some rapid fire to the extent that we can have rapid questions here. Can you share examples of where personal and professional boundaries might blur and how I can handle those situations? So I might start with Sierra and then move to Alazar, Justin.
Absolutely. So I'll give you my example. So my example is I work in social media, and then obviously I have some social media accounts of my own. In my case, this is not a conflict of interest because it's nothing on the technical side. However, say you are an IT professional and your 9 to 5 is you work for Shared Services Canada, and then on the weekends you also perform IT duties at a separate private company, that may be perceived as a conflict of interest because you might be using some of the tools from the public service to help support your role in the private service. So that is the best example I can give you where it's clear cut. I know we mentioned when folks go to pursue political offices. So say, for example, if I had a cousin and I am helping them with their campaign on the weekends, is that a perceived conflict of interest? It could potentially be. So whatever examples you have, it's best to bring them to the ethics office and they will just paint the picture for you very clearly.
Thanks. Alazar, Justin, did you want to add?
Sure, I'll add an example. When I was working at Justice, I used to work in the tax litigation sector, and in my personal life, I would get invites from I'll give you an example, the Big Four, as we call them, like KPMG, EY. Again, this were like fancy dinners and everything, but is that perceived personal or conflict because you're doing taxes? But this is, yes, this is an invite on your LinkedIn. Come for a quick event, and but then again, though that's when it was blurry, where it was like I'm attending as Justin and not as an employee, but it's the perceived uh the perception that you're attending. People, if somebody takes a picture, they'll be, hey, there was a public servant at this event, and they probably have a court case against the government. Who never, like, you never know what's out there. So that's an example I'm giving. Thanks, Nancy.
All right. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question. I wanted to get in some really important questions. How do you address situations where my manager is not respecting the respect for people value towards me? Who do I speak to without repercussions? That fear of reprisal. So I'll start with you, Justin.
So another good question, and it depends on the situation, the gravity. There's always this scales. Like, I would go to their supervisor, to their director, also go to your peers and ask them, how can I address this? Is this something that has to go to their supervisor first, or should I go to HR? But there's different tools, like there's the ombuds in the department who can be a good source. Again, it depends on that gravity. Is this something affecting only you or a few employees on the floor? Go to the director. You can even do them in tandem. Go to their supervisor, go to the director, go to HR, and you'll see they'll respond, and they'll guide you into how you can manage this situation.
I'm going to go to that final question. What are some simple ways I can show integrity in my day-to-day work, even if I'm not in a leadership role yet? And I'm going to start with Alazar on that one.
It's a good question. And again, we all subscribe to the same values and ethics, no matter your level, whether you're a new student starting off in the public service to a person about to retire from the public service. So there are tangible ways that you can demonstrate integrity in your day-to-day work. What I would challenge everyone on the line to do is have these conversations in your team meeting. I personally do that with my team so that they can see, we can hear from them, like the management team and everyone can hear about how they're demonstrating these values and putting it into action. Because what I would say, it's hard to say a blanket statement that this is how you do it, because like I mentioned at the very outset, the public service is very diverse. There are many roles. So again, I could give you from a finance perspective how I see integrity being worked on by my team not in a leadership role. So ensuring that the accounts are accurately reported, flagging any concerns with respect to suspicious expenditures or what have you, so that they can be rectified, providing advice, sound advice in terms of who can sign what. So I think I would ask that, challenge, ask yourself, what are you doing in your day-to-day? And it's not a grand thing. It's the day-to-day. It's very routine, and you'll be shocked to see that you're actually doing this by the nature of the work that you're accomplishing. Hopefully that makes sense, but I'll pass to my panelists if there's anything else that they'd like to add.
I think I would add a few examples. Be honest, responsible, respectful, courageous, the conviction, lead by example. And I'll give you like managers talk, people talk, colleagues. So let's say somebody wants to hire Nancy, they'll talk about her integrity. They'll be, oh, she's a respectful person. She's kind. She works well with people. Ciara is amazing to work with. She, like those are the things, as Alazar say, day to day. So those are a few examples.
That is awesome. You guys are awesome. Your wealth of knowledge. I know I learned a lot, and I will definitely look at this recording on the YouTube page or check out the podcasts. I have I was taking furious notes. I have 3 key takeaways. One, the personal reflection, really thinking about what motivated you to join the public service in the first place, that call to serve, and harnessing that motivation to drive your work and your behavior, your respect for democratic principles, and your dedication to excellence. And we saw that through many, many of the questions. Secondly, leading by example, and as Alazar noted, it doesn't matter where you sit in the organization, you set the tone for how values and ethics are lived in your workplace. If you lead by example, others will follow. It's contagious. I think that's officially a Public Health Agency of Canada assessment, but just to say, absolutely, it doesn't matter where you sit. And keep the conversation going. Today's session is one more step along our individual and collective values and ethics journey. Keep asking those questions. We heard that a couple of times reinforced today, and how they apply to real life challenges. And it is a complicated time, and I'm sure there are many more questions that will be tapping our colleagues about going forward. So seek mentorship, and I already saw a couple of mentorship notes there. Justin, I saw your name attached to a couple of those. Share questions and challenges openly, and be a values and ethics champion wherever you go. Like, being a public servant is an incredible opportunity to make such a meaningful impact in the lives of Canadians, and by grounding ourselves in our shared values and ethics that define the public service, we will together build and maintain the trust that is essential to a healthy democracy. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your questions. See you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.